Chanda Burrage advises our next group, and they've been working with C40 cities.
Hi, faculty and students. I am so thrilled to be here at the end of the semester sharing our final capstone briefing on behalf of my team. And this capstone was created for our client C40, who tasked us with exploring how to ensure that client solutions are not only equitable and just, but also effective. But first, I will introduce you to my team and wonderful advisor, Chanda, who has worked diligently to engage with the client this semester. Thank you so much for all of your work, and I really look forward to graduating with you all at the end of the semester. So today, we're going to reintroduce our client, C40, walk through our project's objective and approach, and then we'll share key findings from the city's survey, followed by the indicators that we mentioned during the midterm briefing. We're also going to look at how that framework actually plays out in both a city context and an indicator context, before wrapping up and sharing our final recommendations and deliverable to the client. So our client C40 is a global network of nearly 100 of the world's major cities. We're talking New York, London, Jakarta, all of whom have mayors who are committed to making urban sustainability a priority. Cities cover 2% of the Earth, but they make up for 70% of global emissions. And we also know that 55% of the world's population lives in cities. So it's critical for C40 to promote inclusive climate action. C40 does this through technical assistance, data insights, peer learning opportunities, and generally helps cities design policy and implement them in a way that's equitable. C40 has preliminary indicators for measuring inclusive climate action, but they wanted to develop clearer methods for actually collecting and monitoring that data while also understanding from their participating cities what's most important to them. C40 came to us and tasked us to develop a framework with globally scalable indicators for their cities to measure equity and inclusivity within their climate solutions. And to do that, we considered ways that readily available data can actually inform us of how climate change affects communities differently, particularly those that are marginalized or low-income groups who actually have a disparate experience of these social and economic vulnerabilities. And it was from that our equity-related indicator structure was born. But first, we wanted to level set on what equity is. Equity refers to fairness and justice in the way that people are treated, taking into account different needs and circumstances to ensure that everyone can thrive, whereas inequality is the presence of disparities, which are often embedded systemically in resources, opportunities, or treatment among different groups. And there are three ways that we looked at equity. We looked at opportunity, participation, and access. So opportunity, ensuring that everyone has the chance to succeed, regardless of their background. Participation, guaranteeing that they can also actively engage in the discussions about decisions that are being made on their behalf. And access, which removes barriers so individuals can actually get resources that help them thrive. Use of equity-related indicators is actually nothing new. In fact, they've been the focus of many governments, NGOs, and international standard-setting bodies for a number of years. And we use that existing data to sort of format our team's approach. We started by reviewing existing bodies of literature, looking at how they relate into statistical reports that inform attainment of the various SDGs. And then we established a baseline of 86 potential indicators across 12 key themes, really significant, we know. And from there, we went to C40 to conduct a validation round. So we narrowed it down to 43 indicators across 5 key themes. And the reason for doing so, aside from eliminating complexity, was also eliminating duplicates. So air pollution, for example, might be a concern both within the built environment, but also transportation. And so we wanted to eliminate measuring things twice. To refine following that, we conducted a structured survey, which we sent to the participating C40 cities, asking the respondents to rank indicators based not only on importance, but also difficulty to measure, which helped us surface the top 3 equity indicators, both overall and within each theme that we identified, which clients can then leverage in improving reporting from their member cities. And we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but we want these indicators to complement existing climate initiatives and leverage current best practices from member cities that are already implementing them. And our final deliverable is guidance on how to implement these indicators that can be used by all of the C40 cities. Our survey wound up reaching 11 authorities across 10 cities, many of which were from LATAM, but we also had presence from APAC, Africa, and Europe. And we wanted to show you sort of a visual matrix of how our responses went. So respondents, as mentioned, rated each metric on 2 scales, importance and difficulty, which helped us then get a totality score. And that defined importance minus difficulty. So that was helping us look at quick wins, i.e. anything that is easy to do, but also very important. And that helped us surface the actual top metrics. And some notable callouts from the data are that health, waste, and transportation had higher difficulty ratings generally, whereas energy and built environment were seen as a bit easier to obtain data for, and therefore might be a little bit more of a short-term solution for cities looking to implement indicators. Overall, there was an even 50-50 split of general difficulty and ease, which again gives us a little bit more purview into what's more short or long-term. And importantly, we know that the response was not 50-50 global north, global south, but we did see that despite the participation gap, there was still relatively even response in terms of difficulty and importance. So we do believe that based on this sample size, this data is scalable. So I'm not going to list off each one in the interest of time, but you are totally welcome to look at our report and see them, but I'll just walk you through the top 3 indicators, a couple of the top 3 indicators per theme. So thinking about the built environment, we might have looked at something like sidewalk coverage and quality. In transportation, respondents told us that perceived quality of public transportation service was very important to them. Within energy, customer cost savings, when clean energy is actually implemented was critical. In waste management, we thought about households that were aware of local recycling protocols. And finally, in health, we might have ranked level of perceived anxiety, stress, and depression as important. So again, knowing that those indicators were most important based on what cities told us, we deemed these not only important in measuring equity, but we also wanted to develop guidance that could be used to implement these indicators in practice. And in the report that we're currently drafting, we put into context how each indicator has been used by successful cities, not only in measuring progress, but in actually starting these as kind of new initiatives from an opportunity, participation, and access perspective, and lay out their actual methodologies to collect the data so that these can be established elsewhere. For each indicator, we provided real-life examples of other cities, and talked about how those indicators actually tie to their broader climate initiatives, and helped them measure their progress both in climate action as well as equity for their specific populations, because not everyone's coming from the same baseline. And we were super fortunate to use New York City as our case study, and we chose it for a few reasons. So one, we're extremely fortunate to have both close professional and faculty relationships in this locality, people who have dedicated their careers to making their fields equitable across all of the themes that we outlined. New York's also a really prime example of a case study because of its diverse demographics. So it's home to more than 8 million people, different income demographics, and also different boroughs with dense population and very different wealth disparities. Also, a concept we're very familiar with in this program is redlining. New York, as shown on this map, has a notorious history of racial and environmental inequity, and so it's something that the government is working to rectify right now. And we went about this case study through interviews with experts in their field, as well as across our 5 different sectors. We talked to them about what equity means in their field, how is it measured. We talked to people at the MTA, the New York Presbyterian Hospital, the New York Assemblymen, and through this case study, we learned how impactful, consistent, and transparent data measurement can be, which is something that New York is still relatively good at. And we also use secondary research to complement those findings and support them within the deliverable. And a few takeaways from this case study, it not only highlights how interconnected these sectors are and how the success of one cannot exist without the success of the other, but we also find that this was a globally scalable case study to look at for both the global north and global south, which we outline in the deliverable. So just to give you an idea of where we stand now, at the midterm, we were still refining our list of indicators, and at this point, we're now finalized with the indicators, and we're in the report writing stage that we're delivering to C40 by the end of the semester. And we have a couple recommended next steps for them. So first, they're going to validate and build on those findings by further participation with the C40 cities and use this as a foundation that they can eventually roll out as their formalized guidance. This is also a really important year for C40. So it'll be 20 years of that organization existing and also 10 years of the Paris Agreement. And there are a couple of milestone events this year that they can actually generate some of this guidance and receive feedback on it. And so as told by our contacts at C40, cities are focusing more and more on climate action implementation and looking at equity within them. And they frequently ask about ways to better improve and monitor those equity impacts. which makes this really, really timely. And ultimately, these indicators support a path forward where equity and sustainability go hand in hand in cities around the world. And we really look forward to delivering this to them. So thank you. I'll open the floor for questions. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for the presentation. It was very educational. Thank you. Just questions like, will this slide be available anywhere? Or?
I believe they get posted on the SUMA capstone site after everything's finalized. So yes, please look for it.
So I know that you mentioned New York is a great case study and can be applied to many cities kind of across the globe. Curious then how perhaps that data ends up being fragmented to apply, or you say, this subsection of the people here is more representative of a different city. Like, how are you actually taking what we know from the city and maybe making it more applicable for different locales?
Yeah, so I guess two responses within that question. Like, one, why New York and why is it a good case study? And two, like, where is it fragmented? So we consider New York good in terms of data collection, as in like the actual effort to collect data is well done. The actual implementation is a little bit less thorough, I'll say. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good in terms of like the demographics and the actual baseline, but implementation needs work. And so, but it is the place that we had the most access to experts, and that's why we chose it. In terms of actual data fragmentation, I mean, a lot of these indicators, if you look through them, are not just like statistical demographic data that comes from like a census. It also has a qualitative aspect or requires surveys, which are obviously always kind of impacted sample sizes of people who are participating. And so we can't truly know, like, based on sentiment, how true that data is unless we really had like a large sample size. So that's where it gets a little bit more challenging. And I think the indicators that came up as difficult were most related to qualitative responses. Yeah.